Hi everybody, Creative Katie, Karen Burchill here. Welcome to my channel. Today, an art journal tutorial from the Break the Blank Page, What Comes Next series. This page, we broke the page by applying designer tissue paper, more specifically, designer napkin layer that I had stenciled on all these lovely patterns. Hover over the progress bar at the bottom of the screen and you can go directly to the step-by-step summary that I've included on these videos. So the first step here is to apply color to this background. I'm going to apply color with a makeup sponge using my block and blend technique, or the block and blend technique. I guess it's not really mine. I'm using a gray purple from Liquitex Basics and this bright aqua green and gesso. And I'm mixing them on the same makeup sponge and just blending them on the page. Now, the feel of this page initially, because it was brown, was very vintagey. And I loved the patterning on it, the combination of the stenciling that I had chosen, and that really directed my decision. For me, when I looked at that, I saw vintage, which I wasn't in the vintage mood, so this page is not going vintage. But it also made me think of gardens and flowers. So I went with a floral theme, as you'll see with my focal image. I'm blending the paint again right on the page. I want some areas, I want the darker purple, I want some of the areas to be lighter purple, so I'm mixing it with white. Some of the areas are a mixture of the bright aqua with the purple. I'm getting a very soft, cloudy background feel here. And in real life, this does look very patchy, but I'm not worried about that. I know this is only the second layer. I love how that little bit of stenciling in the background is still peeking through. And on another project, I may try to duplicate this and keep that. Because I loved the stenciling that was there, the pattern that was there, and I lost so much of it because the bright aqua and the gesso are very opaque paints, I lost some of that pattern. So I grabbed out those exact same stencils from the designer tissue slash napkin paper, and I'm stenciling on more pattern. Here I've chosen white. I want to keep this light and airy. I know that the focal image that I'm going to pick is going to be a darker color, so I want the background to be soft and ethereal, I guess. And as usual, I'm using white. Now you can see one of those is brighter white or more opaque, and others are more subdued. And I like building in that variation. And you can see how this pattern is more forward than the patterns that was there in the first layer that we had painted over. And having pattern that looks closer or further back adds interest to your page. So that stencil was the Onion Blossom stencil. This one is sheet music. And I will put a link to both of these videos or both of these stencils in the description box below. Here I'm coming in with that purple. Now the purple that I'm using here is actual color. It's called gray purple and it's from Liquitex Basic and it's new to me and I love it. It's subdued, it's muted a little bit. I just love it. But if you don't have that, you can take deep purple and add a little bit of gray or a little bit of black with white and get that subdued look. I'm targeting the stenciling with the purple on the areas that are more teal because I want them to show up. This is a stencil called Dotted Rings, and again, it was in the background. And you can see now, compared to the beginning, which did look distinctly vintage, this is looking not vintage. It's bright, it's light, it's airy. So even using the same stencils with different color applications, you're getting a completely different look. And remember, when you break the page, that is simply the first layer. That's the getting started stage. Sometimes that becomes very predominant in the finished page, and other times it just leads you to what comes next. So this is an actual photo that I had taken in my garden, and then I did some Photoshop and I blew it up to this extra large size and cut it out. Now I printed this on copy paper. The copy paper I use is a little heavier than most. It's 24 pound, and I find that it stands up to a lot of the wet medium and doesn't pill as much as a 20 pound copy paper. I get mine from Costco, and I believe it's the Roland brand if you're interested. Here I'm just adding a little more pattern now that I have an idea of where my focal image is going. I want to see a little bit more of some of this stenciling peeking through. I want. Back to printing that out. I printed this out with my laser printer. Now, if you don't have a laser printer, you can print out on inkjet. You'll just have to do something for it. Google, you can spray it with a fixative. Spectrafix is a non-chemical fixative. It's an all-natural one. And there's other ones that are, including I hear hairspray, but that's not something that I've had to deal with. So I can't tell you exactly how well that works, but other people have indicated that it works. So right now we have this great background. And really, any focal image could go on here that works. I'm sticking to an analogous color scheme. And those are colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. You know that they're going to look pleasing together. They will blend wet and wet and not make mud. And then they also will look very cohesive on the page. Now, because I have pink in my focal image and no pink per se in the background, I'm going to add a little bit of pink to it by splattering. This just ties everything together just that little bit more in a very subtle way. Now, because my flower is like this extra big flower, I went with a bigger sentiment. And this one says, believe and achieve. And it's a sentiment that will be in my Embrace Possibility pack, although the formatting here may not be. I've been playing with, I wanted to get some with curves and different things, and haven't quite figured out all the bugs. If you're interested in my sentiment packs, please check out the link to ninniesnapkins.com. They're all available as instant digital downloads in her store. And you can check out exactly what's included in each pack so you know exactly what you're getting. I'm gluing this down with TCW's matte gel medium, and I'm putting a layer underneath and then on top. If I'm putting it on top, that also seals it, makes it a non-porous surface. So when I do shading or painting on top of this, it's going to take the paint better. You could also put a coat of clear gesso. The clear gesso prepares it, seals the paper, and prepares it to take paint medium afterwards. I allocate one brush to use with my adhesives. Adhesives tend to be really hard and they're hard to get out of the bristles, and that the brush tends to get a little wonky after a while. So if you allocate one brush, it doesn't matter. You can keep using it and it doesn't matter if the bristles get all wonky and weird on you. Now that this is dry, I'm just cutting off the excess. Turning it over makes it a little bit easier. And people ask, like, what are you working on? This is a page from an old recipe file that I've repurposed as an art journal. It's kind of manila tag weight paper, and it works beautifully for mixed media. So it was great. So if you're looking for a cheaper alternative to an art journal, check those out. Now I did do a wash of magenta on top of the echinacea that wasn't caught on camera, and just to brighten it up a little bit, because this is the focal image and I wanted it to be a little bit darker than it was. And now I'm coming in with the floating acrylic technique. That's the shading technique that I use with acrylic paint. And if you want to learn that technique, I will include a link to that video in the iCard. If you click on the eye in the top right hand corner, that will take you to that tutorial. It's a great technique to learn, and I like shading with that technique because it is permanent when dry. Whereas a charcoal pencil or a watercolor pencil or the Stabilo All pencil will reactivate. So I'm shading, I shade on top of the echinacea and then I shade beside it on the background to make that focal image pop. I'm also doing that around the sentiment, and I edge the page using the same process. I shade with the darker color and then I come in and I add highlights with white. If I was doing this on a larger page, I may add more pattern or texture using modeling paste on the parts that show. To introduce some of the white from the sentiment into the page, I'm splattering with white and then I splatter with black as well. Splattering hides imperfections that you may see. It kind of distracts the eye, and it's a nice finishing touch. And I splatter with thinned acrylic paint in whatever color I want. But most often it's black, white, or gold. Always give the time for the splatter to dry so you don't smear or smudge it. And here I'm coming in with the black. Also, between splatters, you may want to make sure it dries because I don't want gray splatters. And if I hit the, splatter with black on top of where it's wet white, I may get a mix that I don't like. So just a word of caution. So go and look through your photos and use some of your own photos as your focal images. So here's the summary of the step-by-step. So we started with designer tissue paper / napkin papers that had been stenciled on. That pattern gave us the motif and the pattern that we're going to use. I applied color using the block and blend technique. I was using an analogous color scheme. That means colors that are next to each other on the color wheel, the teal to the pink there. Those colors are going to be pleasing and they will work. I came back and I added more stenciling, but I used the same stenciling that was in the designer tissue papers that I had made. I collaged the focal image using my own photos. Leftover pieces, I can save this. This is beautiful color and texture to collage on a page and break another page. I adjusted the color by doing a wash of the magenta, and then I came back and did some shading and highlighting on the focal image, the sentiments, and I edged the border using the floating acrylic technique. I added the sentiment using a larger scale that seemed to fit the page, and then I added splatters. Thank you for joining me. Give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment, ask me a question. Until next time, go get creative.